Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm going to be grading a whole bunch of NBA trade deadline deals from this season. Now, up to this point, basically all my videos about the trade deadline have been about why teams did what they did or what exactly was happening if things got a little bit complicated. I haven't really given my own opinions about what I think about each trade, so that's what we're going to be doing today. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. All right, let's begin with the Clippers landing Marcus Morris. The trade is the Clippers getting Marcus Morris and Isaiah Thomas, who they have since waived, the Knicks getting Maurice Harkless, a 2020 first and a second-round pick from Detroit, and the Wizards getting Jerome Robinson. Now, for me, let's go team by team here. For the Clippers, I'm going to give this a B+. And the reason is because I'm not sure that Marcus Morris was necessarily the guy that they needed to get at the trade deadline. I still feel like they needed a little bit more size outside of Zubats and and Harrell. And I felt like that more was the spot that they should have tried to upgrade with this big Mo Harkless expiring that they have, rather than bringing in someone like Marcus Morris. However, as a player, I do think he's going to help them. He's going to be versatile. He's going to be able to make some shots. He's going to be able to score a little bit. He's going to be able to defend a little bit. He's a bigger body. I do have slight question marks about his ability to kind of be a little bit of a ball stopper on offense, especially after being with the Knicks and being, one of their better players, surprisingly, in New York, their leading scorer. That definitely worries me a little bit because he did have some of those tendencies at his past stops. But overall, I think this is pretty good value when you consider giving up Harkless, who's a worse player than Morris, that big expiring, and a first-round pick that probably isn't going to be that high in the first place. This makes sense, especially for a team that, in my opinion, is one of the very heavy championship contenders this season. And now for the Knicks, I'm also going to give them a B+. For me, getting any kind of value out of Marcus Morris is a good thing for them. At times leading up to the deadline, it seemed like they maybe weren't going to make this move and trade him. I'm glad they did. Getting an expiring, getting a first, and then getting a second round pick that could be relatively high as well is good for their rebuild for sure. And then for the Wizards, I don't really have a grade for them because, it's Isaiah Thomas for Jerome Robinson, and I think Jerome Robinson still has the potential to be a good player down the road, but it's just kind of unknown at this point, so I'm kind of giving them like an incomplete here. Next up now, in my opinion, the funniest trade of trade deadline this year. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers getting Andre Drummond in exchange for John Henson, Brandon Knight, and a second-round pick in 2023. Let's actually begin with Detroit here. I don't even know what grade to give them. I guess I'm going to give them like a C-, but all I can do really is just laugh at this because I've been saying for a while they should trade Andre Drummond, they should trade Griffin, they should, rebuild their team. But even I, who, didn't really think all that highly of Drummond's trade value, didn't think that this was all it would take. This is essentially nothing, right? Like, if Brandon Knight and John Henson are expiring that you don't really care about, and then a 2023 second round pick, like that's all it took to get Andre Drummond. Like, a C- or D is really the only grade I can give here because they didn't get anything. And you can, make an argument about what Drummond's true value is depending on, how much you value his rebounding because that's his only elite skill. He's a free agent this offseason. There's conversations to be had here, but there's just really nothing that I can say about Detroit positively here. For Cleveland, I'm going to give them, I guess, a B, but again, like, I don't really know what their plan is either. At least they have the opportunity now to re-sign Andre Drummond in the offseason if they want to, but essentially this is the cheapest rental of all time, and then if it goes well, maybe they re-sign or he finds a different team and it's no different to them because they gave up literally nothing. Okay, now we get to the big deal of the trade deadline. I was completely shocked when this one went through just because it seemed like up to that point, the Warriors were not interested at all in making this deal, and then they finally did. Timberwolves getting D'Angelo Russell, Jacob Evans, and Amari Spellman in exchange for Andrew Wiggins, a top 3 protected first-round pick from Minnesota in 2021, and a 2021 second-round pick, which I believe is also from Minnesota. For me, for Minnesota, I'm going to give them an A+. I really am. I think that this was an outstanding move for them. The way this seems like to me, this seemed like a trade framework that they had discussed multiple times and the Warriors had said no each time, and then they woke up on trade deadline day, their front office was like, all right, let's go ahead and make the move. And I say that because this really isn't a ton of value for someone like D'Angelo Russell. Unless the Warriors have a much higher opinion of Andrew Wiggins than we do, which is definitely possible if they think that he could end up actually being a really good player for them and they're getting a pick, and, obviously a guy that fits a little bit better with the roster instead of having another guard in the D'Angelo Russell, then that part makes sense. But for Minnesota specifically, like, this is outstanding value. Wiggins is arguably on one of the worst contracts in the entire league, depending on your opinion of him. And then that top 3 protected pick in 2021, if they're any good at all, won't be that big of a loss. As long as they're not giving up like a top 10 pick next year, this is great value. The only problem is if someone gets hurt and they have an awful season next year and they give up like a top 5 pick, then things start to look different. But when you consider how unhappy Karl Anthony Towns has been lately and how much of a difference this move will make in improving his happiness in Minnesota, in addition to the on-court basketball stuff of those two guys playing really well together, at least on the offensive end, this is a really great move for them, so I'm going to give them an A. For Golden State, I'm going to give them a C. And again, it depends on the future value of that draft pick, whatever it ends up being. Unless they really believe in themselves and whatever magic they have to try and quote-unquote fix Andrew Wiggins, this just isn't enough value. And as I said in my initial D'Angelo Russell video, there was no reason to make this deal right now. All these pieces would have been available in the offseason. They could have made this deal after the season was over if they wanted to. I don't understand why they rushed into it. I feel like D'Lo has more value than this around the league. I feel like other teams would have been interested in making a deal similar to this if this was all that it took. So the only explanation here is that they thought that they can really fix Andrew Wiggins and he fits better with their team and he can be really good for them over the next handful of seasons, because otherwise this honestly doesn't make a ton of sense. Next up now, Andre Iguodala going to the Miami Heat. So the Heat received Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder, and Solomon Hill in exchange for Justice Winslow, James Johnson, Dion Waiters, and then also Minnesota and Memphis swapped Gorgui Dieng and James Johnson in this deal. So for the Heat, I like this on a couple of levels. So I'm going to give them a B+. It isn't like a hugely impactful, this is a great trade in my opinion, but I do think it's at least good. Andre Iguodala brings them great defense, brings them someone that has a championship pedigree. As long as he's healthy, even with his advanced age, he should be really good for them. And you also have to consider the fact that they're bringing in another wing in Jay Crowder to help their depth, because as I talked about in that initial Iggy Winslow trade video, if it was just Winslow for Iguodala, I would not have liked the deal. But the fact that they're getting other rotation pieces like Solomon Hill potentially, but more notably Jay Crowder, makes this deal better for Miami in my opinion, so I'm going to give them a B+. For Memphis, I'm giving them an A+. I really am. I'm all in on the Justice Winslow thing. Adding someone like him to this young core is such a big deal for them. I don't mind that they're taking on some long-term money with Waiters and supposedly Dieng now as opposed to James Johnson. I don't mind that at all, because Winslow is someone that, in my opinion, really fits perfectly with this whole Memphis thing. Like, he's had issues staying on the court for sure, but they can be patient with him. They can make sure that they are doing the right things to get him fully healthy. He's under a cost-controlled contract. It's not like they need to re-sign him this offseason. And he has the defensive ability to be someone that can be really good for this team and move some of their other players off the ball if need be, because he is at times a really good all-ball player, and arguably that is when he is at his most effective. So I absolutely love this deal for Memphis when you consider it as an extension of some of the other moves that they've made with the Mike Conley and the Marc Gasol deal. This is a team that I am so excited to continue to talk about. I've got a video in the works about what could be next for them this offseason in terms of making more big moves. I can't say enough about how happy I am with how the Grizzlies have not only been rebuilding, but specifically this trade. So I'm going to give them an A, and no, I'm not going to grade the Timberwolves part of this deal. And last up now, the big one that started off really the trade deadline festivities. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I already talked about it in detail in a previous video and because there's a lot going on here. So first, Houston receives Robert Covington, Jordan Bell, and a 2024 first round pick. I'm going to give them a B simply because we don't really know what this is going to look like long term. As of the recording of this video, they played well against the Lakers last night, but we just have no idea what this super small ball lineup is going to look like, how effective it's going to be. I have no idea. Nobody really knows. We're all kind of waiting to see what it's going to look like. I am definitely interested, and I applaud them for doing something different, so I'm going to give them a B. Meanwhile, the Hawks get Clint Capela and Nene, who they since waived, basically in exchange for that Nets first-round pick. I'm going to give them the only A+ of the video, to be completely honest, because the more that I think about it, whatever you think about Clint Capela as a player, I think he is a perfect fit for Atlanta as a pick-and-roll player, and he provides them much-needed stability in that starting lineup as saying, hey, we know this is going to be our 5 for the next handful of seasons, and only giving up a non-lottery first-round pick is a great asset and a great trade, in my opinion, for Atlanta. As long as Capela continues to grow and develop alongside these other young guys that they have, which I assume he will, this is a great deal for them. So I'm going to give them the only A+ of the video. Next up, the Minnesota Timberwolves getting Malik Beasley, Juan Hernangomez, Evan Turner, Jared Vanderbilt, and a 2020 first in exchange for a whole bunch of bench players. I like the deal. I really do. And obviously they give up Robert Covington as well. I like the deal. I'm going to give them a B. The only reason this isn't a B+ is because I didn't understand now in the context of getting D'Angelo Russell why they needed to trade away Robert Covington, because it seems like Covington would be a guy that would fit well with D'Lo, but just specifically in the context of this trade, I'm giving them a B because I do like Malik Beasley. I think he's someone that they can re-sign and be a nice piece for them moving forward, and they're getting the first as well. And when you're talking about Robert Covington, in terms of his value, I think that's about as well as you were going to do either this year or moving forward. You can make the argument that they should have kept him to play alongside D'Lo and Cat, which is why maybe this grade is a little bit lower than you would have thought. But for me, getting Beasley, getting the first in exchange for Covington is nice value, not to mention some of the other guys that they got in the deal that could turn into some pieces down the road. And then last up for Denver, I'm giving them a C for getting Gerald Green, who they waived, Keita Bates-Diop, Shabazz Napier, who has since been, I think, moved, and then Noah Vonleh, and a first-round pick from Houston. The reason being, I didn't understand why they needed to trade Malik Beasley. I don't think any of the players or the assets that they got in this deal are better than Beasley objectively. They get the first-round pick, but it's via Houston. It's not going to be all that valuable. And I feel like there's a scenario in which we get to the postseason this year, and they're in a series in which Malik Beasley would have played and helped them a lot, and they don't have him as a backup now to Gary Harris. And I didn't understand why they needed to be involved here. I mean, I get having the first-round pick and how that could help them down the road, and maybe there were other trades they were looking to make at the deadline that didn't materialize, and it would have made more sense in that context. But just in general, I would have rather kept Malik Beasley on the roster personally. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.